Okay, hi. This is day number 2. We could think of it maybe as part number 3. Day number 1 is first half, second half,
Right.
because we broke for lunch. We have a similar schedule today. It's May the 3rd, 2017. We're in Austin, Texas, and that's for the Smithsonian version. And we're in Dr. Vinay's office in his practice in Austin here, so if you don't know about it, you should.
And it's called Oak Hill
There you
Wellness
go.
Clinic.
Oak Hill Wellness Clinic in Austin, Texas.
That's Kaya. Susan.
Susan.
Meridian.
Okay, and you have to show yourself.
Aloha. There you go.
Okay. All right. On Monday, today is Wednesday, on Monday we spent some time on related theory. I had started that day, more or less, by saying that the neurolite is not important, or will become important when you appreciate more neuroplasticity. The fact that our brain, for all of our living days, is always changing and adapting. I had said it's as though we're in a car that's moving, and it would be great to have a steering wheel. Right? Otherwise, it's kind of going where it's going. So that was Monday. Then we spent time bridging over into some of the concepts of the neurolite itself, some of the concepts of composition. I had said that the light and sound, unlike classic brain entrainment, which is a rather repetitive, simple signal, that we're working with compositions, and that there are two types of compositions. It's a little crude to say, but there's an amount of truth to it, at least as a reference, that it's a little bit right brain, left brain. I don't want to make it so black and white, because it's not like that in the brain. But in compositions, you have two types. One type tells a story, and the other explores a feeling. And it's extremely important when you're working in neuroplasticity to recognize that stories will bring a feeling, typically if they're well composed. If you watch a movie, one of the devices used to make sure that you're getting the proper feeling in the story is the musical score. Right? The music tells you what you should be feeling. Older movies, and some movies still now that are more artfully done, have little to no music. They rely on the language, they rely on the interactions, they rely on the script, they rely on the actors, so that you get the feeling. But, as you well know, most movies play it safe, or you could say take advantage of, it's not negative, applying a musical score so that you know what feeling you should be having. So we have two types of compositions in human nature. We have two types of compositions, consequently, in the neurolite. Some of the compositions are more linear. They move one thing to another to another. They develop as a story. And like stories, there are different devices that you would use. I'm not going to explain them, but you know, for example, just as one device, that one of the ways to bring out unknown characteristics of an actor, of a character, unknown elements in their persona, is to put them into conflict. And you see many movies, even comedies, will bring situations up by creating conflict, and that conflict is not meant to throw you off the story, it's meant to meld you more deeply into the story, because you experience things you wouldn't ordinarily experience about the characters. So in the neurolite, I even have things like that. Then we have compositions that are more about exploring feelings. The story tends to be more linear, although storytelling now has a lot of demand, in the sense that you have vignettes. You have this thing is happening, and then over here, this thing is happening. And one of my favorites, it's a little bit older now, but a tremendous ensemble, is Pulp Fiction. Bruce Willis and Travolta and Samuel. Yeah, where it seems like the movie is a bunch of different stories. But bit by bit, they start to link, and in the end you realize that all of these different stories, these different people are unified in a theme that's not apparent in the beginning. So these things are like this because our brain is the way it is. It's not a coincidence that it works. And the same thing, when you explore a feeling, it's really not quite as linear. It's not as though one thing leads to another, which is the basis of storytelling. Right? You're allowed to move in a non-linear fashion and exploring this feeling, and there really isn't meant to be a conclusion other than the deepened recognition of the feeling. So, a story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Classically, that's the way of turning nonsense into sense, meaningless into meaningful, noise into signal. So, we explored that in our own way on Monday, and then we also went into the Help Right Now. The Help Right Now understands that there are different aspects to neuroplastic change. You may recall that there was functional, which is in minutes to hours. That means you're working with pre-existing patterns and signal sets, and you're bringing them forward. It's as though you've got tools in your garage that you forgot about, and we go in there and bring those tools out from the garage so you can use them. You can't have deep change happen that fast. So function is called functional plasticity, working in minutes to hours, sometimes seconds, is like that. It brings forward what exists from futility into utility. Okay? Then the second, the synaptic plasticity, happens over the course of days and weeks. That's where you're using, we'll call it pre-existing hardware, pre-existing nerves, but new patterns of firing, right? I think the analogy we had given is roads, where to get from here to downtown Austin, there are several routes, and you are familiar with two of them, but let's say there are 5. So using pre-existing neuronal structure, you can create new functional patterns. And that can happen in days to weeks, which is really good. You just didn't know about those roads. Now you know about them. Now you can use them according to whatever. That's good. Then you've got the neuronal plasticity, which happens over the course of months. And that's where you're building new roads. You sit, the analogy I gave is, you're on this side of the hill and you see if there was only a road that went over that hill right there to Austin, that would be great. So it takes a while to build the road. You know the pattern that you seek, but there's no road to go there. So you know the synaptic pattern that you want in the learning, but there's no nerves that are there. So nerves will actually grow. It's called neurogenesis, right? Neurogenesis. So the neurogenesis is something that generally takes place over the course of weeks, days to week. Pardon me.
Months. Over months.
Months, thank you. We're in the number 3. So there's functional, minutes to hours, synaptic, days and weeks, neuronal, months.
And that is literally growing new nerve synapses.
Well, it's actually the combination of the 3, right? But the critical element is that it's actually changing structural architecture. And it takes time to grow. And they don't grow all at one time, it's phasic. But the point is that the more it's reinforced, the better the growth. So the last one is called systemic plasticity, and that takes place over the course of years. That's where all of the changes that have happened in the architecture of the brain and the firing patterns of the brain actually integrate into the entire organism. Right? So now, in the same way that things that are happening in the brain will echo into the soma negatively, where the entire organism drifts towards a certain condition over time. Although it may have started quite micro, it ends up being expressed macro. The same thing is true, well, generally of neuroplastic change, whether it's adaptive or what's called maladaptive. Many of the problems we experience are the result of the organism sustaining long-term appropriate short-term reactions. Like inflammation is a really good thing, short-term, because it mobilizes a lot of healing factors. It's a really good thing. It's a very good short-term solution that should not be extended long-term as a maladaptation. If I burn my hand, in the beginning I shouldn't move it a whole lot because basic healing needs to take place. You know, the substratum of the tissue base and so on, so don't move it. But if I don't move it at all at any point, then the fingers will fuse together as scar, and what began as a very proper short-term response to a skin burn, long-term is horrible. So this is we talked about this, and you have to have this perspective when working with any neuroplastic approach. And here we have the neurolite as an instrument using the sensory avenue. Any of the sensory is the same. Whether it's mental or movement or sensory, it obeys these laws. And you recall that I had pointed out the trigger, the cardinal trigger for neuroplastic change, adaptive or maladaptive, is attention. That attention state to the experience is considered critical or fundamental. And this is really much of the reason, not the only, but much of the reason why we experience pleasure and pain. You know, so when you recognize that pleasure and pain are meant to, among other things, mobilize neuroplastic change because it draws conscious attention to the experience, to the event, even to the location. Okay. Help right now is where I recommend most every person begin, unless they have a depth of experience working with neuroplasticity already. And more, there are people in their specialized fields, whether they develop it within a medical domain or a wellness domain. You know, there are people that are, say, excellent yoga teachers that are really fired up, right? Fire it to wire it, are really fired up about incorporating the principles of neuroplasticity into their yoga practice and their yoga teachings, because now it's understood that that's the kinesthetic, the movement, the motor aspect, and that when you move the body, you move the brain. So people that have pre-existing expertise are finding that all of a sudden they have a new view. Right? Hi, come on in. You can help her in. It's okay. We just have somebody that needs to get through us all. Okay. We have a guest. We're just taking a seat. I'm explaining to the camera. Hi. Okay, so I'm going to keep talking. My recommendation is for practitioners, even with deep skill sets, that haven't necessarily worked with light and sound, and haven't worked certainly with the neurolite, because at this point it's relatively new, about 6 months old or so, that work with the help right now. Get used to the tool, the instrument, get used to making choices, and look through the window of neuroplasticity as to what's going on, knowing that you're working primarily in functional plasticity, that if a person can have a better day because of what you've done, that's a success. As long as the expectation is put in place that there is benefit, what you're experiencing is real, but the sustained quality of the benefit is going to likely dissipate after 24 to 48 hours. Normally when you have a neurolite session, there's a mistaken concept that the experience occurs when you're having the light and sound. Certainly, that's the stimulation, that's the message. This is a very rough analogy, but it's as though you go to a psychologist and you have a counseling session and you experience whatever you do within the session. You may like it, you may not like it, you may have a revelation or just be kind of confounded. It's when you leave the session and you go back into your life that the value, the benefit, the action of the psychological session actually is activated. Otherwise, it's a little bit abstract. If you think that, the session is the world. No, the world may not be willing to listen to you. The world may not be interested in giving you positive neuroplastic reinforcements. So you have to appreciate that it's an integration. The analogy I normally give is that the neurolight session of light and sound is like eating food. And that you can have a very pleasurable experience eating food, or it's rather neutral, or there might be even certain tastes that you're not that crazy about. But the point is that after you eat, the digestion, and then the assimilation, and then the actual utilization of why you eat, other than entertainment, it takes place, right? So in a neurolight session, I encourage you to help the person understand that the experience is the experience, like eating a meal. But that the important thing is that it begins, the benefit, the benefit begins when the light and sound ends. Recognize that there's especially a sensitized time of about 2 hours when you can increase the benefit by cooperating with it, or decrease the benefit by contrary states and actions. So this appreciation of the nature of neuroplastic change and how the neurolight still follows and recognizes that. Okay, and we had talked about the idea, I'm doing a little bit of a summary, but it leads into what we're doing directly now, that oftentimes when a person has a bad day, whatever is creating that bad day, it could be kind of one of two categories. One is something new and unusual happens, and consequently they have a bad day. I'm not specifying whether it's cognitive or emotional or somatic, but they don't like it. If the cause of that is transitory and the impact was not too great, all they need is help through that 24, 48-hour period, and it's going to be fine. It's like you feel stiff because you're in a car a long time, you get a great massage, boom, it's fine, because you did a road trip and that's it. The other category of help right now is when you get an aggravation of a pre-existing chronic state. So if you've got a weak, stiff back, and you lift something and your 4-year-old wiggled and you twisted in the wrong way, you could still use help right now, and it may calm this aggravation of a chronic condition, which is still a big benefit. But one must understand that it doesn't leave a deep resolution. It's like, oh, now my back is better. No, what it does is it puts you back into a more available state for a long-term solution. So help right now is short-term, and brain shaping is long-term. In the help right now you have two types. One is highly transitory. The cause is not linked to a chronic condition. It emerges, you present some experience, they integrate it, they feel great. Maybe you have to do it a couple of times, 2-3 times, depending on the degree, but it's not an aggravation of a pre-existing set. If it's an aggravation of a pre-existing set, you're still going to be a hero, in the sense that the person is going to be really thankful they feel better, but don't think the issue is now solved, because it's not. All right? So that's kind of where we ended, except that we then went into the concept of the interview style. That's where we ended the day. And what I'm going to do now that the dust is settling and Catherine has made it into the room, Sunday, how many days? On Sunday, it's Wednesday. Trying to do mental math. Is that 3 days ago? I did a number of help right nows with persons that were at People's Pharmacy that hosted us. And you weren't here, except Catherine was for a number of them, and she saw what it was like. And what I'm going to ask, without a lot of detail, but the kind of what you observed, what you would say, because we talked about that style on Monday afternoon. You weren't here for that.
Okay.
But you were, I would think, maybe more purposely there on Sunday. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to just talk to these folks about what you saw, what it was like, what your impression is. But you can turn the camera to.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Put me on the spot. I love it.
I know.
Hi, good morning. I'm Catherine, and I'm a wellness specialist at the Westlake store,
People's Pharmacy.
People's Pharmacy. And
I'll help you, but you just,
Yeah,
just reflect on it.
sure, on Sunday I got to see maybe 4 or 5 different sessions, all unique and special. I noticed from the beginning nobody was apprehensive. Everyone was very curious and hopeful to accomplish something. They were there with a need.
Most of them, not all, but most of them also were listening to the 2-hour presentation
Exactly.
before, so they didn't come in cold.
Right. They knew what they were in for. And
Interview style. What was it like to set up a Help Right Now session from your observation?
Garnet does active listening, and for each person, he allows them to express what it is that they are hoping to accomplish, whether it's, do you want to feel more of something?
Good.
How do you put it? Or less?
Do you want to feel more of something good or less of something bad? I use that
Right.
that opener
That is a great opener.
to go fishing, right?
Yeah. And it seems like it went both ways, more or less. And I notice he likes to get down to the feeling, how they want to feel. Some people aren't quite sure what it is that they are looking for, but it seems that you were able to get to the point, whether it's, I want to feel less worried, or whatever. And then the 11-minute session, and
then the follow-up.
so the follow-up is where I start crying, generally.
Yeah, and she did.
And I can't help it, because every single session, everybody immediately, when they open up their eyes, they're in such a state of peace and calm, curiosity about what it is that they saw in their head. They cannot believe the light, the colors that appear in the shapes. But more than that, they were curious about their state of being. And yeah.
So the active strategy, they went away with something to do.
Exactly. And so you give I call it the marching orders,
Mm-hmm.
but expressing the 2 hours that are most important to really, that's when the magic starts happening.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay,
yeah,
that's good.
yeah.
All right, why don't can you swing this back over?
Here, I can get it.
All right. Just to me.
Oh,
All right.
hold
Look
on,
at
let
it,
me make
framed up
sure.
okay.
Oh, you're so handsome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's why I paid her $5.
That's right.
Okay, so, thanks for that. Because yesterday we were doing it, talking about it theoretically, but you got to observe.
Sure.
Okay, so enough for that. What I'd like to do right now is look towards today. It's the time it is now. I want to clarify an aspect of the brain gym that's extremely important that we didn't discuss on Monday. Then I want to go into the premise of brain shaping, which is long-term, and then end up in the neuroplastic reinforcement discussion about movement, mental, and sensory. Our plan, and we'll see whether it works on the time frame that we have, is that we're having a few people visit us today, where I'm going to do basically what Catherine was referring to, is do what I call the interview, arrive at a decision, apply it, and then do the follow out. It's not really follow up, but the follow out. Okay, so that's the concept for today. Brain gym. Some of you have heard this story. I'll make it quick. That I had I had thought that the compositions, the whole design of the Neuralight was finished. That I had done all of it, and then my partner and I got an invitation to present in the Philippines at a medical conference. It was very attractive, so he went, and I had done up a PowerPoint. He did a great presentation. He came back while he was there, because I'm attracted to what's happening in research. I came across an extraordinary brand new study that had just been published a couple of months earlier, so still vibrating. You know, in the old days before the internet, you never came across a published study until sometimes months, but usually years after it was finished, by the time it made into a peer review, a journal of some sort, and then you happened to get the journal, you know, in the world of paper. So it had just come out, and what had been done was a mapping of what's called the harmonic frequency sets of the 7 main brain networks. Part of the evolution in cognitive science, in neurology, is the fact that there are indeed localizations. That's the first theory that came, even starting with phrenology, you know, more than 100 or whatever, 20 years ago, that bumps on the skull gave you an idea of the characteristics, phrenology. But that led to what's called localization, that certain parts of the brain have certain jobs to do. And that was a huge advancement in cranial neurology. Now it's appreciated that those localized areas will oftentimes be like an assembly, like an Olympic team, where they come together for a certain purpose in a networked relationship, fulfill that, and then after the network has been enabled and used, then they're disassociated back into their normal function. So it's this very fluid networking, and they're called networks for that purpose. You can use the internet and computers to create networks and dissolve networks according to, like if you have a special project, you bring these 5 people together, they're all in the same chat group or something, and then when the project is finished, it's like, well, they go in and out. The reason, as I understand it, that these networks exist is because the brain as a whole operates right near the edge of chaos. There's always some order, but it's a very strong, pronounced chaotic state of signaling, where it goes not instantly, but almost instantly, from near chaos into temporary order, and then back into near chaos again. And the appreciation is that these networks create a synaptic bridge, where you can quickly go from near chaos to temporary order, and then back again into that state. Because chaos sounds bad, but the thing about chaos is you could also think of it as pure and perfect potential, because it doesn't have any disposition. If it's pure chaos, and the brain is never pure chaos, but chaos means that there's no order. That means that there is no bias, that it's more able to assume new order because it doesn't have a pre-existing order. So chaos is not a bad thing, and there's a lot of these days, you know, chaos theory and all of these things, is to appreciate that just because we don't see the pattern doesn't mean that it's not valuable. Sometimes we'll say it's chaotic, but actually there is a reasoned pattern that's just not evident. So to go from near chaos in a flash, because we're doing it right now, from near chaos into temporary order and then back into near chaos again, the brain has these bridges where instantly localized functions network to achieve the state and then kind of disassemble or turn off again. So I came across this research, and it was, it's theoretical. They didn't do it for application. But what they gave is all of the frequencies, not just the frequencies, but the relative relationship of them, like the dominance or subordinate sets within the set. And it just completely blasted me, because it's never been done before. Most of the frequency states that are classically referred to are just done from mapping the neocortex. And even then, like when you put a bunch of electrodes, even if you put 200, it's still an averaging between them. And also you can't get any deeper than the neocortex. And there's a lot of brain that is not neocortex. So now with the techniques, brilliant people are able to identify dominant frequency states. So my partner Guy came back from the Philippines, and I said, "You got to see what I got." It took me about 2 days, honestly, and I was able to interpret the data into the basis for compositionals, which I did. So everything had been done. The user interface was done, and it's pretty simple. You know, the brain food is a separate device performing the service of up-regulating energy. So within the Neuralite proper, when you go to the user interface, you've got brain gym, brain skills. And this actually represented a third category. Somewhere between brain gym, fundamental exercises, and brain skills, dynamic learning compositions. So one is pure exercise, one is applied learning. And I said, well, what do we do? It would have been a real kind of nightmare, because the Philippines thing forced us into like a premature soft opening, a soft launch. We'd already committed, here it is, a few were already sold right away. So like, what do we do? Do we like totally recreate the user interface and make a third category? You know, brain gym, brain networks, brain skills? And I said, well, no, that's like way too much work, because it complicates the timeline. Well, what do we do? Well, we can either put them in the brain skills, we got 80 of them in there, or we could have the brain gym, and there's some kind of software parking places there. Okay, we'll just make them as a list, put them in brain gym. So, you know, they do have an affinity to the gym aspect, the exercise aspect, because they do work at building capacity. So that doesn't change it. You know, it's not like a false decision that we made. It was a convenience that had a reason. Ideally, there would have been a third category. But in the brain gym, you have a list of 7, they'll be alphabetical, of brain network reinforcements. Hi, you have water being delivered. Come on in. It's okay. It's reality TV. So this is your porta gym, huh? You don't have to do weights anymore?
24 pounds each.
Wow. Wow.
My father, who's passed away now, had an ice delivery company, to show you, before much of refrigeration. And all day he would deliver 50 pounds on his shoulder and 100 pounds on his side, up and down stairways all day with ice.
And wasn't it like a big...
It's a big old chunk.
Yeah.
Has to be.
Yeah.
It's just a
Melted.
big,
Yeah.
this isn't like ice cubes in a bag.
Exactly.
This is one big chunk.
I
So
grew up in a boat and we'd have to carry these 25-pound blocks of ice.
yeah, my father was the arm wrestling champion of our county. Okay, take care. Have a great day.
You too.
Yeah. If you kick it over, don't worry. You're in a medical office. We'll give you a treatment. Okay, so what we're talking about are the brain networks.